digestive system, actually shorter than I remember. But aside from this document, there's also the absorption to the ilium and the liver stuff, I think. Liver and pancreas. But I don't think we need to know options for the upcoming tests. So macromolecules are digested with the digestive system, which means carbohydrates, lipids and fats, proteins, nucleic acids from biochem, and they're broken down into their monomers. So, and then they're used throughout the body. So there's 4 stages. There's ingestion, digestion, absorption, and elimination, which is not the same as excretion. Elimination means the removal of solids, whereas excretion is byproducts of metabolism, which means liquids or gas. And the solids are not direct products of metabolism, so that's why we have elimination or defecation instead. So ingestion, digestion, simple enough. Digestion, there's 2 kinds, chemical and mechanical. So mechanical would be things like removals from chewing it up and it mixing around in your stomach. Chemically would mean acids dissolving it and enzymes breaking it down as a substrate. Absorption is into the ilium through the small intestine and then into your bloodstream as nutrients. So the pathway of food, you start from the mouth. Okay, honestly, I don't think you're gonna need to know that there are 20 teeth in a child or anything like that, or like these kinds of teeth, but there's 2 incisors for biting, 2 canines for tearing, 6 for grinding, 6 premolars, 6 molars for crushing, and caries are cavities. And this funny looking word, mastication, it means chewing. Gingivitis, the itis part means inflammation of gums. Okay, your tongue rolls food into a bolus and it makes things easier to swallow. This is how your taste is distributed, sweet and sour, bitter right in the middle. There are many chemoreceptors called taste buds. There's salivary glands. There's 3 pairs of them. There's 2 pairs under the tongue and 1 pair by the ears, so that means there's 1 on the left, 1 on the right. And in saliva, so that your salivary glands, they produce saliva. And within saliva, there's water, enzymes, salivary amylase, and mucus. So this is the first of our enzymes. Salivary amylase, it breaks starch down into disaccharides, maltose. So specifically starch into maltose. And this is alongside water. But notice that it won't break down everything. It doesn't make sense, right? If you start chewing some rice, it's not going to get all broken down in your mouth. It's still going to have leftover starch to break down in the stomach. There's the hard palate, which is a bone that separates the nasal and oral cavities. And if it's incomplete, there's a cleft palate. Soft palate. Make sure you can't breathe and swallow at the same time so you won't choke. The uvula triggers your gag reflex. Whoops. Pharynx is the passage between your mouth and esophagus. The epiglottis is a flap that covers this up. Esophagus is a muscular tube capable of peristalsis, which is this motion where it contracts and relaxes to make a wave motion up and down. So it'll push food downwards no matter what. You can even be doing a handstand and you can still swallow food. So this outermost layer is the serosa, the red one. And the muscularis is the next immediate layer. And there's this circular layer inside, is the circular inner muscularis. And the longitudinal outer layer here is in charge of peristalsis. So make sure you know the difference there. And then the next layer is the submucosa, which contains blood vessels and supplies nutrients. There's nerves to trigger the peristalsis activity. Then is the mucosa, which protects the lumen. It secretes mucus to let the food slide down easily, and the lumen is a hole through which food travels. And remember, lumen just means hole in a tube in biology. It doesn't have to be restricted to just the esophagus. Then is the cardiac sphincter, which is a valve opening into the stomach, and it prevents the acid from your stomach and such flowing back up into the esophagus, because that'd be pretty disastrous. Your stomach is J-shaped. I don't see it, but our teacher says it. It's a muscular sac that stores and digests food, especially proteins. I say especially because the enzymes here only deal with proteins, but the hydrochloric acid is also part of the chemical digestion for other foods. So past this cardiac sphincter after the esophagus, your food will spend 2 to 6 hours here. There's extreme folding called the rugae. And if you think about it, if you eat and get really full, then your stomach will expand, so your stomach won't burst. And this is the stomach wall, the lining. The stomach wall has smooth muscles for churning and mixing, and has gastric glands, which you should there's a handout about, and you should learn them. They produce gastric juices, and these gastric juices include hydrochloric acid, which activates the enzyme pepsinogen, and after it's activated, it's the enzyme pepsin, which is active and works to break proteins into peptides. And of course, there's water, as always, and there's mucus. After is the pyloric sphincter to prevent backflow from the small intestine back into the stomach, and that leads into the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. Oh, so there's mucus that coats the stomach wall to make sure you don't digest yourself, because it is also made of protein and, well, you know, organic matter. Ulcers are holes in the stomach wall that are actually caused by H. pylori in a study in 1982 by Barry Marshall. And the previous belief was that it was excess hydrochloric acid and pepsin enzyme that would cause these ulcers, but in fact it was actually this bacteria, and this brave doctor actually drank some of the bacteria to find this out. So this valve opening at the end, the pyloric sphincter, prevents the backflow of chyme back into your stomach. So this chyme will actually leave and go to your small intestine, for which there are 3 sections. 25 centimeters, 2.5 meters, and then 3.6 meters approximately. Duodenum is the site of the most chemical digestion, meaning that all these fancy enzymes are released here and digest the rest of your food that have not been digested yet. So you'll remember only starch have been partially digested, and your proteins should be broken down into peptides, peptides by now, according to this. So the first of our enzymes is lipase, which turns fat droplets into fatty acids and glycerol in the ratio they're supposed to be in, 3:1. Pancreatic amylase will turn starch to maltose. Trypsin will turn proteins into peptides. Nucleus will turn your genetic material into nucleotides. And this is not an enzyme, but sodium bicarbonate is a buffer that ensures the hydrochloric acid won't go overboard with the acid. So the pancreas secretes these pancreatic juices is what they're called, into the duodenum. And the liver will additionally secrete something known as bile, which is this greenish fluid that actually emulsifies fats into fat droplets physically. So if you imagine like soap and you're rubbing it against your dirty dishes, those fats will be immersed and turned into fat droplets as they clump up. And the reason for this is to increase surface area, so for lipase to work. So remember, mechanical digestion, and this is called emulsification. Maybe if you make pasta, you'll know. And the next is the jejunum, which was 2.5 meters long. 2 enzymes are secreted by the jejunum. There's peptidase and maltase, and these are intestinal juices. So these do the wrapping up. So if you remember, peptides and maltose, peptides are still they're polymers, and so is maltose. They're not monomers just yet. So peptidase will break these peptides into 2 amino acids, and maltase will break maltose into 2 glucose. The ilium, finally, is the site of absorption, and 3 modifications occur for the surface area to increase the intake. So these are the circular folding of the ilium itself, which you can kind of guess based on the way the small intestine is usually drawn. Then there's villi. And then there's microvilli, which are on the surface of villi. And this all serves to massively increase the surface area to around 200 meters squared. So you see the villi, these little bumps here. If you magnify, you'll see this shape, and then there'll be more microvilli on them. And here, tricky, but you're gonna have to know the villus structure. The microvilli, this is the villus, not the microvilli, but the microvilli would just be little flaps. This big purple structure here, well, drawn in purple, is the lacteal, which is in charge of your fats, so it does fatty acids and glycerol absorption, and it sends it to your lymphatic vessels. These are the red line, the red blood capillary surrounding, absorbs basically everything else. So amino acids, glucose, nucleotides, ions, water, and vitamins are all absorbed by these blood capillaries and sent to the liver through the hepatic portal vein. And especially glucose is really important to remember because it's converted to glycogen. And you should remember that glycogen is stored in the liver and throughout your muscles. So this is the epithelium, which is this coating, which is also known as the mucosa. And it's known as the mucosa because it's embedded with these goblet cells that produce mucus for lubrication, once again. And finally, the large intestine is shorter than the small intestine. It's also known as the colon. So the walls have many goblet cells, these goblet cells from earlier, to produce mucus and to make sure your poop slides through easy. Your poop is going to have any undigested waste matter, bile pigments to give feces its nice brown color, and 30% of it is actually just bacteria, straight up. There's coliforms, E. coli, which is in charge of making vitamin K for you because it breaks down some of the undigested waste, and vitamin K is a important byproduct for blood clotting. Methanogens create methane gas, which is the gas that you fart out and it smells and you could light it on fire if you really wanted. The main function of the colon, though, is water absorption because you want to reabsorb any water you've lost. But if you absorb too much from the poop, you'll have constipation. But if you don't absorb enough, you're going to have diarrhea because your poop will be still watery. And this is what the large intestine looks like. So from the small intestine leading in from here, it goes through the ascending, the transverse, and then the descending. This is the little part underneath the opening. It's called the cecum. And then there's the appendix, which is a vestigial structure that we don't need anymore. Or I don't know if we ever needed it. But basically, if any food gets trapped here, it can get horribly inflamed. And it could be life-threatening if it bursts. So it goes to your rectum, to your anus. And there's a double sphincter here. So your rectum, there are a lot of nerve endings here. Very sensitive place. So it can tell you when you need to poop. And the anus has double sphincters to make sure that you don't accidentally poop. You can hold it for a while. Then there's elimination, also known as defecation. Then there's the accessory organs. I'm not sure if I should cover them because I don't think they'll be on the test. But briefly, liver, 6 functions, detoxification of alcohol and poisons. Storage, glucose is glycogen for keeping it at 0.1%. Stores iron, vitamin A, vitamin D. Produces a lot of bile. And it's made of mainly bile salts and cholesterol. Excess bile is stored in the gallbladder. It breaks down useless red blood cells, known as Kupffer cells, through phagocytotic cells. And they release heme from hemoglobin to recycle the iron atoms and the globin, these second-degree proteins. And it also creates plasma proteins for your blood, which are albumin, globulin, fibrinogen. Okay, and any surplus cholesterol is converted to bile salts for use in your digestive system. Okay, and very, very briefly, there's jaundice, which is a liver disorder, and there's a hemolytic and an obstructive type. But basically, your skin does not get there's too much of this bilirubin pigment in your skin, and you will look a little different. But other than that, not a big deal. There's the pancreas, which has a collection of cells called the islets of Langerhans, and it's in charge of controlling your blood glucose level, as well as the digestive enzymes that are sent into the duodenum. And yeah, so it releases insulin and glucagon. Insulin decreases glucose, and glucagon increases the glucose, and then there's stuff to do with diabetes here. But I don't think you'll need to know too in depth. But type 1 diabetes means that you're insulin dependent because you are not producing enough insulin, which means that you're getting a glucose decrease. And type 2 is usually if you eat too much and you're become insensitive to insulin, meaning your glucose is too high and you'll get obesity and then a bunch of health complications. And yeah,